Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's work session. Today, we're going to get a report on the Greenway Master Plan. This is for public review and comment. Chris, are you here to speak to us? There you
I
are.
am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. We ready to go? Okay.
Yes.
Good morning. I am Chris Nickfar with the City of Raleigh Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Department. I am the project manager of the Greenway Master Plan. We are very excited to be here today. We've accomplished a tremendous amount of work, and I think we have a great document produced. Today we'll be giving you a full overview of the entire process, as well as what's included in the document, with a plan to come back to a future meeting for council adoption. I'm joined today by Jared Draper with Tool Design, that's our consulting firm, and I will turn it over to him for the presentation.
Good morning. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Perfect. Well, it's good
Actually,
to be with you.
I'm having trouble hearing you. If you could put the
How's
microphone.
that?
Still a little difficult.
How's that?
Better.
Is that better?
Yes.
I can make sure to speak loudly. That's not a problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Theater voice. Perfect. Appreciate that. Well, good morning. Glad to be with all of you, Mayor, members of council. We are excited about presenting the Capital Area Greenway Master Plan update. As Chris mentioned, we are going to talk about the information as well as have a discussion today. There will be that later request for adoption and a future meeting. You can see our agenda today, really thinking about kind of big picture when it comes to the history, purpose, overview of the plan, community voice and public engagement, recommendations, as well as endorsement meetings. Let's start with where it began, the early plan and the history of the Capital Area Greenway system. I think it's really important for us to start with the fact that the Capital Area Greenway system is made up of both trails as well as open space corridors. And this was something that was imagined as a concept in 1969 and really formally created a Greenway plan, the first one in 1976. The original intent of that plan was really around conservation, preservation, active use, and transportation. And I think what's really important is that the work that we're doing today and what we're presenting today in the updated plan really does tie back to all of those kind of original intent and purposes of 1976. But since then, a lot has been done and continues to be done. Updates to the master plan happened in '86, and then the last full master plan update was in 1989. That was 33 years ago, and I think that that's really why we're here today talking about the Capital Area Greenway plan update. It doesn't mean that things haven't been done since the plan update, and the city has been hard at work. 1995 extended some of the network and to the urbanized service areas. And then in the last decade, the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Department has adopted a system plan, continues to work on new elements of that. And the Capital Area Greenway Planning and Design Guide was adopted in 2014. And then we started this process in 2020. Right before the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think what's really great is that this work has been going on for decades, and our system is a reflection of all of that great work. But our city is changing, and I think that the needs are growing for access to recreation and having options for mobility, active transportation, but also the continued effort for environmental preservation through those open space corridors. So with that, the purpose of this document as it reads is that it lays out a path for addressing the needs of a growing community that includes equitable access, recreational opportunities, environmental conservation, active transportation, connections to transit, and so much more. And the way that we're doing this is through strategic and thoughtful recommendations. I think it's really important for us to recognize that because the people in our community, first of all, the community itself is growing and that the needs are different, but also the way that we're thinking about strategic and thoughtful recommendations is to really prioritize flexibility so that implementation can be accomplished. But all of the recommendations and actions are intentional and kind of setting forth a path forward that really is achievable for the next decades to come. So with that, we're going to go through an overview of the document itself. You can see the plan contents. I won't spend much time here. This is more of the table of contents for all of you. But we really get the plan started with the benefits of the Greenway system itself. Going back to that intent around environmental protection, really focusing on wildlife corridors, floodplain management, water and air quality. Those are kind of instrumental and foundational to the capital area Greenway system. But there are other big benefits to our system. Health of users, quality of life, and we know that people are moving here because of our quality of life, recreation, active transportation benefits, as well as economic development. I think what's really incredible about the work that the city has done and where we're moving forward with the capital area Greenway system is that the original intent around environmental protection and these other benefits, they're mutually beneficial, is that as we see more people using the system, as we see the quality of life grow, we have the opportunity to preserve more land, more wildlife corridors, as well as see some of the economic development benefits in strategic locations across the city by providing more access. So why now? Not only has it been 33 years, so that's probably a reason in itself, but before the pandemic, we're already seeing a growing demand for people to access trails as well as kind of the natural environment. COVID-19 perpetuated this more than maybe anything else in our lifetimes. And as you can see, some of our major corridors and trail corridors experiencing exponential growth in the number of daily users between spring 2019, before the pandemic, and then spring of 2020. And I would say that these numbers are probably something that we would continue to see. And one of the reasons why that this plan prioritizes the balance of expanding new trails as well as reinvesting in our system as it is today. So we started with a review of the system today. These are kind of a take on the existing conditions. And really, the system is large, 117 plus miles of trail, over 300 miles of open space corridors, and preserves over almost 4,000 acres through Greenway easements along those kind of open space corridors. And we really wanted to take each individual element and understand kind of the baseline and the foundation before we ask people about their input, as well as understanding how they would feed into recommendations, those strategic and thoughtful recommendations. So I'll walk through each one of these. First, under the existing condition was environmental significance. The capital area Greenway system continues to preserve natural characteristics of the land, stream corridors, riparian corridors, as well as wildlife corridors. It has done this really well in the past, and the recommendations moving forward are to continue that and to build upon it. Looking at mobility access, there's a variety of ways that people are desiring to move within our city. And I think one of the things about the capital area Greenway system that is so great is that it becomes an essential part of a larger system of how people move. And so we wanted to understand how sidewalks, bikeways, transit, thinking about accessible routes, equity, as well as safety throughout the system, not only along at street crossings, but also with user conflicts on the system itself. What was important about each of one of those characteristics that could influence our recommendations? Next is the amenity assessment. One of the things we know is it's not just a trail or the capital area Greenway system is not just about moving people from one place to another. The capital area Greenway system is a destination in itself. And so we want to make sure that we understand how people use that space and if there's opportunities to really elevate placemaking, but also making sure that it's intuitive. And so we did an assessment of wayfinding signage. looking at facilities such as restrooms, drinking fountains, seating, trash and recycling, bicycle parking, repair stations, as well as public art, because we know that there are a lot of opportunities for all of these things in appropriate places that can really add to the experience as well as the expectations of our users. The last piece around the existing system today that we wanted to take a look at was maintenance and operations. And again, this is just a snapshot of the work that is kind of going on now, but really kind of there's comprehensive inventories that the city staff are already doing. 117 miles is a lot of trail to maintain. And so they're really working through lists that include both routine maintenance, such as mowing, removing debris and vegetation, as well as capital investments that are kind of more intensive with funding and resources, but that could include, repairing bridges or tunnels. And so really understanding all of those elements of the system today were important, kind of, again, foundational elements before making those recommendations. The next piece, and maybe the most fun, is around community voice and hearing from people of what they desire, what they like, what they believe can be improved. And so there was a steering committee created. The purpose of this steering committee was to guide the planning process and really the development of this document that we're presenting today. There were 23 members across a variety of organizations and groups and interests. You can see some of those here. Members were approved by the City Council in late 2019, and they represented a variety of organizations. And I think what's important about this is that representation gives voice to a lot of different interests that can change the way that recommendations are developed and how we see kind of recommendations and actions moving forward. Big overview, I'll dive into a little bit more detail. We had 3 phases of community engagement with a variety of meetings and survey participants and comments, focus groups. The first phase of community engagement was just to listen. And I think that that's a really important step that we have to take in any one of our kind of plan updates or planning processes, is that we need to know what people want, what people, and hear from kind of the needs across the community. Before COVID-19, we launched our kind of listen phase. We had a survey online that ended up with over 4,000 participants. We tabled at the Raleigh Half Marathon, which we anticipated being the first of many tabling and live in-person events, which we had some great excitement around this plan and the update to it. We met with a number of focus groups, as well as had several steering committee meetings. The very beginning of this, if you remember, it's hard to forget, COVID-19 pandemic kind of changed the course of our country, of our world, and we shifted to kind of virtual engagement, making sure that our online survey was stayed up for longer. We put signs out across the city along the system to get involved. We started posting signs on transit vehicles and other businesses and handing out business cards that, again, any way that we could to get people involved in the planning process. Phase 2, almost a year later, we had done our existing conditions review and kind of understood the system today. We had already kind of collected and started to understand some of the summary findings around that first phase of public engagement, where we listened to people. And then we had started thinking through the prioritization of what would it look like and how would we implement new trails and what those kind of reinvestment in the system would look like. We wanted to bring all of that information back to people to kind of give an update and as well as a check-in. Because we were still virtual, we had an online survey. We also reached out to community-based organizations. We used all of the networks that we could to get the word out, met with the Parks Board as well as steering committee meetings, and more virtual meetings than I would care to count. But I think that it's really important to realize that those virtual meetings, that engagement was really what started to shape recommendations that were in the draft plan and what we're presenting today. Phase 3 was the end of 2021. This is where we were able to reveal the draft plan to the public. We put the survey back out, had more signs on the Greenway. One of my favorite stories is being on the Greenway myself and seeing someone else scan the QR code that were on one of the signs to get involved and give their feedback. had over 1,200 plus participants in the survey, a lot of which were giving input for the very first time. We held 3 virtual open house meetings, and we're finally able to, because of kind of some downtime or a downturn in infection rates, to have some in-person events and table that some other events across the city. As well, in phase 3, we met with our steering committee. We met with the Greenway committee, the Parks Board, as well as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. Some key things, again, these are all 3 phases occurred over the last 2 years, and so we wanted to give you some of the big ideas that came from all of that engagement. I think the first thing to recognize, and one of the things we read a lot through the people's comments that we received, were that people love the greenways. They love the trails. They love the system. It's something that it is really one of the greatest assets to our community. And that's exactly how people put it, is that it is one of the greatest assets. Additionally, some of the themes were to ensure that trails serve as transportation corridors that connect people to where they live, work, and play. It's really valuable that we put forward active transportation and active uses along with recreation as a goal of the Capital Area Greenway system. For the city to work with developers to construct new trails and to ensure that natural corridors are protected as the city grows. I think that this is 2 pieces that are really important in this theme. One is that there is a developer built a private development investment in our system, as well as the making sure as we grow, as we develop, that we're doing it strategically, that we're protecting land that is valuable and those open space corridors with all of the benefits to sustainability and becoming a community that really values that natural environment. Additionally, construction of new trails is important, but we also need to address the key gaps in the system. Additional themes from all of that public input is that prioritizing maintenance of the existing system is going to improve the user experience. A lot of our initial feedback not only were lines that people drew about the destinations that they wanted to connect to, but also about reinvesting in our corridors to make them safe and comfortable and really change the way that people use and experience our system. Providing safe and accessible greenway system is absolutely essential. And then lastly, one of the major themes is improving signage and wayfinding at decision points along the trails and on-street connections is going to make our system more intuitive, not only getting to it and from it, but also while you're along it. So one of the kind of graphics that are in the plan itself, you can see on the left, it has all of the phases that I just spoke about. Phase 1, to listen. Phase 2, update and check in. Phase 3, reveal and refine. And then on the right, you can see some of those key themes from the public input and really how all of these start to feed into the 10 recommendation categories for the plan itself, which we'll talk about right now. So I mentioned those categories. You can see them here. I think it's really important to note is that one of the key reasons that you do any kind of plan process or a plan like this is to set a blueprint, a vision for the future, and give recommendations that kind of really point you in the right direction, rather than being so prescriptive that flexibility is out of the question and that it really can sometimes be a barrier to some of the implementation moving things forward. And so what we've done through these recommendations are take the input that we received, the conversations we've had with focus groups and the public, with staff, as well as the analysis from the existing conditions, and created recommendation categories that really align with the vision and the purpose of the overall Capital Area Greenway system. The first of those is trail classifications. Prior to this document, there are 5 trail classifications that were identified. One of the goals was to simplify the focus, simplify the actual trail classifications, and to focus on user expectations across the system. I'll walk through those now. The first is Oak City Trails is the first classification. And really, this is an emphasis on high capacity use. We have a lot of corridors that exist today and several that are planned for the future that we believe will connect people to destinations that have opportunities to not only preserve some of the natural kind of environment, but also think about economic development, trail-oriented development, and really those active transportation opportunities. I think that context is obviously important in every single one of these trail classifications, and some of the things that may be appropriate in some places may not be appropriate in other places, but it could still have the same trail classification. The next is neighborhood trails. And as you may guess, this is about connecting to neighborhood destinations, really thinking about kind of the local community and the context of those places. How do we really get people from where they live to the larger system and some of those key smaller connections that are really essential? And so neighborhood trails is one of those classifications that really gives the flexibility to think about that in a lot of different ways, where things may be appropriate and other things may not be, depending on where it is across our city, the type of corridor, and the communities that it's connecting to. And then the last is scenic trails and loops. And this is an opportunity for users to actively connect with nature. I mentioned that one of the goals of trail classifications is really to focus in on user expectations. And we hope that as these trails, new trails are developed, or trails are reinvested, reinvestment occurs on trails that exist today, that these type of classifications will start to be really what drives the decisions around each one of those trail categories, along with some of the design that's already exists and the new kind of design standards that are mentioned in this document. As I think about flexibility and I think about context, one of the things that this plan highlights is that there needs to be a framework for how we move forward with some of that investment. First of all, we need to think about identifying a trail classification, and there are a variety of amenities and opportunities and design decisions that are associated with each one of those classifications. We want to select the appropriate cross-section. We want to think about the details of the design, and then we want to contextualize those for the place that trail is occurring. And so I bring this up because it is very important that flexibility is part of this plan so that projects of opportunity and prioritized projects can happen effectively and efficiently. Other recommendations were around new trails. I think it's really important for us to note that in addition to the 317 that exist today, this plan proposes 163 new miles. 122 of those were already planned for prior to this plan. And those 41 additional miles that are identified were really focused on public input in the destinations that people wanted to connect across the city. As we think about those new trails, we wanted to really focus on how do we prioritize those. And I think this plan does something that's very unique. There's a shift in the way that we have prioritized the new trails across the system. This criteria that we're using and the values that are associated with each one of those criteria really does move us from what would be more of a dominant focus on recreation to an integrated approach to how this system plays into all of our other systems. Still really making sure that there is an emphasis on recreational need, but also balancing active transportation opportunities across the system and how it may work within the other projects and the way that people move within our city and will in the future. Open space corridors is another recommendation. I mentioned a stat earlier around almost 4,000 acres have already been preserved in open space corridors. And this map illustrates that there were already several planned and that more are added to that. Thinking about our stream corridors and how we can really protect those vegetated buffers as well as wildlife corridors. And this is really, even though there may be opportunities for trail construction, one of the key parts of this is preserving the land for, really thinking about sustainability and that environmental significance associated with the system. Trail reinvestments is the next recommendation category. Some of the key considerations that we heard from the public as well as what we saw in our assessment were that we really need to focus in on a few key areas. Wayfinding, making sure that it's intuitive, and I'll mention that the city is already doing work on this. Trail width, really this is a design issue when we think about some of those conflicts between users, that we can design those trails differently to kind of avoid those things. And reinvestment in trail width and how we design is really important. Surface material and kind of overall surface quality is another place to invest. And then thinking about amenity gaps. Again, going back to the user expectations and their experience, that those amenities really do create a place for people to be that they want to be, and the system itself being a destination. A few other recommendation categories, maintenance and operations. These are just examples or a few of those recommendations from the plan. Enhanced communication about trail closure, detours, and maintenance projects. Supporting staff and resources that adequately serve the growing demands and expectations of the system. I will say 117 miles is a lot of miles, and growing that system there will need to be new staffing and new resources, and thinking, kind of evaluating that process ongoing. And then strengthen rapid response to maintenance plan, really focused on clearing storm debris and kind of providing those detours as we really think about active transportation in these corridors serving our population for both recreation and kind of getting to their daily trips. The next recommendation category is planning and development. Some examples from the recommendations are clarifying definitions in the Unified Development Ordinance, and we'll touch on this a little bit later on actions that are already moving or in progress. Incentivizing trail-oriented development where it may be appropriate. Strengthening requirements for developers to kind of contribute to that trail construction and add to our system, and then provide flexibility for developers, the development community, through fee and lieu programmability, for developers, the development community, through fee and lieu programs that could directly contribute to the expansion of the capital area Greenway system. The next recommendation category is trail security. Before reading a few of the examples, just want to note that work was already being done in the Greenway Safety Report. I believe that was kind of brought forward last summer in 2021. And the recommendations in this plan build upon and leverage the work that was already done. So thinking about engage the community about trail security to inform those policies and decisions on operation design and programming. Compiling emergency response, incident, and crime data that's really specific to locations so that we can have routine reporting and really think through and be proactive about identifying opportunities where trail safety and security and overall management may need to change. And then lastly, considering trail design and amenities that can really increase both the real as well as the perceived trail safety and security of the users. And so again, I want to say that these built upon a lot of work that staff was already working on last summer, and you'll see those reflected in the recommendations. Recommendations related to environmental stewardship include some of the examples: enhanced stream cleanup efforts at specific trail locations, promoting a culture of shared stewardship between a lot of different groups, the city staff, trail users, volunteers, agency partners, other stakeholders. And I think what's really important is that if we promote that culture of shared stewardship, where all of these people are understanding that they are not only supporting the capital area Greenway system, but they are also receiving some of the same shared benefits from the trails and open space corridors, that is what's really valuable in creating that culture. And I think that it's a huge goal and a recommendation that I think is very thoughtful and intentional. And then lastly, continue to protect sensitive ecological areas, which from its inception this system has been very proactive in doing, and we want to make sure that we continue that moving forward. The last recommendation category that I'll discuss in some of the examples are collaboration and partnership. Continue to work across departments to further the success of the system. Establish interdepartmental working group to discuss topics related specifically to trails and open space corridors. And I think that we can't stress this enough, is that there's already that communication that's happening, but we're talking about a system that at its full build out and its vision to be 280 miles across our city, and that is connecting to a variety of other systems, sidewalks, bikeways, rapid transit, thinking about the destinations that it connects. And so really having that kind of collaboration in those partnerships is really key to making sure that we're not missing opportunities and that there are other things that we can take advantage of. And then lastly, take a more active role in community conversations around people experiencing homelessness. I think that this is something that we are seeing as consultants, communities across the country really take an active role in thinking about not only how people that are experiencing homelessness, it's kind of concentrated in some of our open spaces, but also kind of that bigger conversation around affordable housing and really taking care of the people that are within our community. All right, so those are recommendation categories. I will move now into implementation before wrapping up. First of all, I think it's really important to note that when all of the recommendations that you heard me speak about, and if you've looked through the plan, there are many, many more, have additional action items associated with them. So how do we get it done? Where do we get started? I think that's really the question that the implementation section is trying to answer. And first of all, we want to point to a phased approach, recognizing that there are things that we are going to do that are ongoing. They don't have like a timeline. They're constantly happening. One of the recommendations in this plan update is to revisit this every 5 years. That may not be the full kind of doing a new plan update, but really thinking about what have we accomplished? Can we check some things off? Are there new opportunities that we didn't know of at the time of the update that we could be adding? And so those are kind of ongoing types of recommendations. We also included immediate term, 0 to 2 years. How do we use momentum of this change and get things started immediately? And then there's those short-term recommendations and actions that are 3 to 5 years. One of the reasons we don't have longer term is because we believe that it's important that revisiting of this plan frequently and routinely every 5 years is important, that we will identify new short-term, new immediate term, new ongoing types of recommendations that can be added and updated to kind of really push us toward the vision and the purpose of this plan in the first place. And then lastly, I'll say that we wanted to build momentum. Some of the recommendations in here we put into a 100-day action plan. And really what was important about the 100-day action plan is that we have to get started. There's some of the items that are identified in that 100 days that we won't complete within the 100 days, but it's important to get started and build on the momentum of the work that's already been done. Some of those that have already that we've identified are initiating some of the UDO updates, exploring some of the opportunities to expand environmental conservation efforts, which I think is something that the city staff does a really good job of doing already. And I think it's important that they continue and they use this plan as a reason to do it more in the next 100 days. And then explore partnership opportunities with nonprofits and private organizations. Leveraging those partnerships is extremely important when we think about new opportunities for trail development as well as reinvestment in our system across the board. Another thing that's included in the plan is a glossary of terms that really gives definitions of a variety of words that were used throughout the planning document, along with spelling out any acronym that may be used. Our hope is that a glossary associated, I would say a fairly comprehensive glossary associated with this plan can be used for other documents. As a kind of a starting point for those definitions. And then there are a number of appendices that the body of the plan gives an overview of kind of the process and what is key, kind of what is that blueprint for moving forward and that path forward. And then all of the detail around reviewing other plans, existing conditions, public outreach summaries, prioritization and methodology, a very long list of recommendations and actions, as well as feasibility and costs are all included in the appendices. So with that, I wanted to talk about some of the endorsement meetings that we were a part of. We were able to meet in the last month and a half with our steering committee, with the Greenway committee, with the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board, as well as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, and received endorsement votes from all 4 of those groups and organizations. I think what was really valuable in those meetings were not only presenting the plan and the things that we heard in phase 3 and those bigger themes, but also kind of any other updates. And from each meeting, comments that we received, we addressed, thinking about, system-wide goals for amenity spacing, really thinking specifically about how we include language and how we write that language around the flexibility for lighting as well as hours of operation, and how the city should really be starting to evaluate where that may be appropriate and also understand where it may not be appropriate. And then lastly, updating graphics throughout the plan as well as trail classifications so that we're reflecting not only our current system, but also what could be in the future. I think one of the key things around specifically the Oak City Trail classification is that it brings in the idea of the urban trail, which is a new kind of type of trail for the city of Raleigh. And I think that's going to be a really important component, but it needed to be paired with something that really shows what our system looks like today along some of those Oak City high capacity trails. So those meetings have shaped the way that we have presented and the information that is kind of in this current draft of the document. And we're excited to bring those endorsement votes to City Council today. With the 100-day action plan, I think that's really it for the plan itself. But I think before I close, I think it's really important for us to note there's some things that are already in process, and I think it's really important. First, from the 100-day action plan, that we're already thinking about, and the city staff is thinking about those changes to the UDO. Also, really the support for kind of projects to increase that safety. I mentioned the safety report, already kind of been thinking about trail lighting, thinking about officers, thinking about pavement markings and signage, all ongoing. Additionally, from the 100-day action plan, the development of a neighborhood trail request program that would not be petition-based and kind of built off of the Neighborhood and Community Connections program. And then lastly, really the evaluation of operational needs, which impacts a lot of the work program and kind of the budget for the city staff, and as you're thinking about what's needed in the future. Lastly, some ongoing efforts addressing safety and user conflicts, etiquette campaigns, thinking about safety on the trails and how people treat each other, promoting user safety through active communication. And I love the term active communication. We're not just waiting, but thinking about signage and using virtual kind of platforms and social media, and then being proactive in providing detours and closure information along the system. Some examples around current funding that can support the plan, obviously the Parks Bond, thinking about funding of potential projects in a variety of scenarios. Also, Penny for Parks tax, which would include funding for signage, amenities, as well as safety upgrades. And then lastly, 2022 adopted budget, which is really focused on some of the recommendations that came out of the Greenway safety report. Dedicated unit of 6 sworn officers, 1 sergeant, to really focus in on public safety along the system today. So I know that was a lot of information. I'm going to take a drink of water, but I would be really happy to answer any questions from all of you or take any comments.
Okay. I have a comment after, but Councilmember Fort first, then Councilmember Buffkin, and then Councilmember Cox.
Thank you for the presentation. You've kind of touched on it a little bit as you were going through, and it's slightly addressed in the backup materials. One of the things I've heard a lot about is issues in terms of safety on the trails, and a large part of that is folks asking, how to improve lighting. Certainly, it's a little colder now, people are not out, but once we get to the spring and summer of the year, people want to access the trails after work, spend more time out there. But the concerns have really been around security, particularly as it relates to lighting. And in the backup materials, there's an indication that lighting is decided in terms of like a case-by-case scenario. And so could you kind of, sort of briefly explain how the case-by-case scenarios are set up and how you sort of pick where you do some improvements and where you don't?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate that comment. I think that the reality of people's concerns around security is very real, and I think that one of the things we wanted to focus in on is giving city staff the flexibility to think about lighting where it may be appropriate. The case by case is really going to be determined around as trails are reinvested in, as we think about the context of those locations. I know that one of the issues the Parks Board brought up is that some of our more kind of natural corridors, lighting can be, even though it would provide a benefit for active transportation use, lighting added to those corridors could impact some of the wildlife along those corridors as well. And so I think that what's really difficult is to say kind of a blanket statement that we will provide lighting everywhere, or that we will only provide lighting in some locations. So my example for you, and I'm getting kind of circling around to your question here, is that as we reinvest in trails, as we build new trails, we will be thinking about who is using them, when they're using them, and how they're in the destinations they're connecting to. And that is going to impact the decision for whether lighting is added. So I would say if you have a trail that's connecting people to a lot of jobs or to high frequency transit, those are opportunities that would be a case where lighting could be really beneficial to add. If you're adding a trail to connect to the Neuse River Trail out in kind of a more rural area, that would be a case where lighting may not provide the same type of benefit. And so the current work that the city is doing is really around evaluating the need for lighting, and then also evaluating the cost for installing lighting. But they are doing some of those upgrades at tunnels and street crossings already.
Okay. Next, we had Councilmember Buffkin.
Thank you, Mayor. And to the staff and consultant team, I want to congratulate you on your work and offer appreciation for everybody that was involved with this. Overall, I think it's a really fantastic roadmap for navigating the future where our Greenway system is going to be more important for commuters and really critical for economic development in the city. From the district perspective, wanted to also express appreciation for the priority given to several trails in North Raleigh between Capitol Boulevard and Six Forks, where there's been a real lack of access. So really looking forward to those connecting with Bailiwick Park, the Big Branch Trail, Marsh Creek, and the others that really going to enhance Greenway service for North Raleigh. So that's very exciting. Thank you for paying attention to that. Just a couple points of feedback. This planning process is a lot of work, so I want to offer at least my view that the staff should have some flexibility on the timing of updates. Planning is important; it's essential, but it doesn't actually get greenways built. So, y'all, if you need more time to do those updates, certainly take it and get focused on building more greenways. Secondly, I really want to see the Parks Department lean in on the partnerships, particularly with the private sector. I think this is the future of park funding in general and specifically Greenway funding that we're talking about here. And this tends to shift the burden from our taxpayers to the private sector for funding these. And we all are acutely aware of the pressure on our tax dollars. So really want to lean in on that. And to do that, we need parks and planning and development to be working hand in glove and identifying those key opportunities and bringing them to the council so that we can make sure that critical links are being made at the right time and the Greenway system is growing and keeping up with the pace of growth in the city overall. And lastly, I want to acknowledge and applaud the decision of this council last year to approve the penny for parks. That is already quietly and without a whole lot of fanfare getting greenways repaired and improved. Whereas, in years past, repairs that were needed, had to come back to council. Funding had to be identified. It slowed it down, and we now have this dedicated revenue stream that will be available for that. So congratulations to this council on that decision. It was really important to the future of our Greenway, and look forward to the action items in the first 100 days and helping out support that, and look forward to longer term seeing this plan implemented. Thank you all for your efforts.
Councilmember Cox.
Yes, one of the things I hear a lot about our Greenway system is general lack of bathroom and restroom facilities. And I was wondering what's in the plan to look at those and determine where we can locate them and actually budget for them and build for them. Obviously, those facilities are important to numerous sectors of our society, different demographics, particularly people who have health challenges, for example. And so I was wondering what we're doing about that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think going back to a little bit the historical side of where we have developed Greenway trails in the past along those kind of natural corridors in flood-prone areas has limited the locations where we can put restroom facilities as well as drinking fountains. We absolutely see the need. Is one of the number one things that the community told us that they would like to see more of is public, restroom facilities and drinking fountains. And I think that what this plan does is starts to really think about some of the corridors outside of those flood-prone areas as opportunities for the trails, which presents a whole new set of standards where we can actually put restrooms that are not in flood-prone, or it's not cost prohibitive to put those kind of facilities in. Additionally, we really want to lean in on the parks system that already has some of those facilities and make clear connections to those as well as other neighborhoods that have smaller parks and those facilities. And so really the shift that we see and was planned, honestly, even before this, around having more Greenway trail corridors outside of those flood-prone areas, I think opens the door for more restroom facilities, more of those types of amenities that serve the public in a way that we know they're telling us that they need. And I think that the last thing I'll say on those facilities is that we really think that as part of some of the trail-oriented developments and some of the economic kind of that trailside hub and clustering some of those amenities together, we can see not only effective maintenance and operation of those facilities, but even some more of that placemaking and economic development adjacent to our trails. So I really appreciate that question, and it's one of the things I'm very excited about seeing more of along the system.
You're muted, Councilmember Cox.
In terms of planning, then, will we be developing a plan and determining, for example, the number of facilities that would be needed, say, per mile or per 100 miles or 10 miles of Greenway Trail, for example, and also any planning in terms of where we can locate them currently, given the current system that we have, which is really quite extensive. I mean, what specifics in terms of planning are we going to be doing for these facilities? I understand it's aspirational to want more, but it's better to actually start really having that plan put into place so that we can budget for them and construct them.
Absolutely. Yeah, this plan does identify some of the goals around some of that spacing of where those facilities as well as other amenities should be spaced along the entire system. But it doesn't go as far as kind of what I would say is like the work plan of individual trails and citing individual bathrooms. And so those are things that city staff would be able to kind of move into the next phase. This really sets that vision forward to where do we want, where is that aspirational piece of where the restroom facility should be located. Yep, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Lisa Schiffbauer. I'm a Greenway supervisor for Parks Department. I just wanted to add to the comment for Jared regarding restrooms. This is something that one of the core stat teams, Growth Natural and Resources, is looking into, to developing a protocol for looking further into restroom locations.
Okay, thank you. When do you think you'll have that information available to us?
I'll have to look into the specifics of that, but we can follow up with the details of that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Knight, then Councilmember Branch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I too wanted to thank you, Mr. Nick Farr, for your presentation and also your leadership in this process, and as well as the rest of city staff and the consultants who worked on it. But most of all, to our engaged public. This is another great example of great community engagement, getting the feedback from our public of what they want. And I think y'all have done a good job of that. The city's done a good job of that, and I appreciate those efforts. I think what you have before us is exciting. There's a lot of potential here. I think as everyone knows, the quality of life of our residents is number one paramount, and our Greenway system has a lot to do with that, both in terms of mental health and physical health. And so I appreciate y'all working on this. Our Greenway system is really what makes a lot of what makes Raleigh as great as it is. So thank you for that. And I appreciate the prioritization of connectivity, both with other forms and modes of transportation, as well as incorporating the reasons that citizens use our Greenway system for not only recreation, but for essential purposes such as getting to school and getting to work, and keeping all those different uses and reasons why the Greenway system is used in mind as we look towards the future and developing our system in a greater way. So thanks again for y'all's work, and look forward to hearing more from y'all as we move forward.
Councilmember Branch.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the presentation. My question comes around emergency services. I think this past fall, there was an issue with the Greenway near me, and fire and EMS had a challenge reaching the person who had an accident. She was on her bike. So are you all working with our emergency services to review our current plan to see where we can make improvements to access for in case of emergency with someone that may fall or have an accident on the trail, as well as in planning the new trails?
I'll turn that over to Lisa again.
So yes, we do work directly with emergency services for that type of thing. It's something that we continue to work on and improve. One thing that's very important from providing that access is making sure that the signage is very clear, mile markers are in place, trail IDs are identified with an address, much like you have a house address. That's something that signage definitely assists with providing those resources. We will continue to look at improving and follow up with that particular incident to see what exactly the issue may have been that can be improved upon.
Yeah, just some feedback. Some of the trails go behind neighborhoods and communities. So if someone has an accident, they may not know the actual street or location. They have to go maybe half a mile or out just to find a street sign. So that may be something to think about. So thank you for that, that you're working on it. My other question was addressed when you mentioned connectivity to our community centers. I think that will help tremendously because we still have some community centers that may not necessarily have a Greenway near it or goes by, and I think that making that connectivity is important. And also, as we look at our ETJ, it has grown a lot since you all started your work. So hopefully there's flexibility as well in the plan to extend to new growing areas and future growth areas, kind of on the edges of our city limits.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Stewart?
Thank you. I've got a question and then a comment. I think this is a fabulous plan. I'm really excited about where we're at with it. I did wonder, and this may be a separate conversation, and I'd be happy to get it back in a report of some sort, but the use or controlling invasives along our greenway paths through herbicides or other methods. I'm kind of curious what our current policy is and to stop using herbicides, especially in the floodplain.
We do have a program for that. I know that our maintenance operations staff is very active in removing vegetation that is invasive, along with other situations that may be occurring along the Greenway system. We can definitely get you some information in a report to that. We don't have the staff here today that can speak directly to that.
That'd be great. Thank you. And then just a comment for us as council to kind of think about. I've heard from a lot of folks that our greenway system as a city makes us super unique. It's what folks talk about when they come to visit, if they're lucky enough to get to our greenways. And I'd love for us to think big about, if this is what makes us unique, then how do we promote it more? How do we market it? How do we talk about it? How do we make sure all of our own constituents, our own residents know about it and use it? And so to just kind of think about that in a really big, innovative way. I think it's kind of the crown jewel of our city. And so I think marketing it could be incredible. I love the use of the great blue heron in some of the presentation. And so I know every time I get out on a greenway, I see one of those guys.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of comments. First, very good job, but our job isn't done. One of our partners on the Greenway system is Meredith College, and they were not engaged in this process. They have some concerns that they've put in a letter to me. I believe that they may have sent to other council members. I'm going to forward this to Tansy Haywood. The big concern is they have a written agreement right now with the city, dates back to the I think the early 2000s. And they've been a great partner, but it's providing dawn to dusk, like it's service. And they are concerned about the 24/7 potential service going across a woman's campus. So they're concerned about security. So I'm going to ask that we reach out to our partners at Meredith. They have some suggestions on ways that they think we could improve the Greenway system, and I would like to ensure that their voices are heard. So I'm going to, like I said, forward this to Tansy Haywood, but also ask staff to make sure that we are engaged with the college and that we follow up with them. That is the first thing. The second thing is we do have a parks bond coming up, and this would be a great opportunity for us to first off, what Nicole was just talking about, branding. This could be our city's brand. I know people who have come here from China to see our Greenway system because they heard it was one of the best in the country. So let's look at ways that we can get people excited about this in the bond. Let's show them what this is, and let's look at ways that we can actively promote this to gain more enthusiasm. So I totally agree with that. And I think that that's something that we can do to really enhance our city's brand, but also promote the parks bond. Thank you. We have any other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, staff. really appreciate your work on this. I know hours upon hours have gone into developing the plan, so thank you very much. And now I am going to adjourn the work session. We'll be back at 1 o'clock for our regular meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.